So tonight we're going to talk about our studio, AGBO, which was founded by Joe and Anthony Russo. I am the creative lead on the animation side there, along with Scott Meadows, who's the Visualization Supervisor, and two of my favorite artists in the world, and also Gnomon grads, Rain Rouhani and Natalie Villarreal. I'm going to kind of talk about how we kind of approach animation, and it's a little bit different, I think, than most studios. And Scott's going to talk about our approach to cameras and editorial. Rain will talk about materials and surfacing and modeling, and Nat's going to talk about lighting. So one way that our studio is kind of different is that we do all of our work in a game engine that I'm sure you're familiar with, the Unreal Engine. And this project was no different. And when we came to the project, there was one kind of big glaring thing about it that was a little bit terrifying, and that was that our main character was a big, furry Persian cat. And so we had to do just a ton of research on the hair system inside of Unreal and the CVARs. And for those of you who don't know what a CVAR is a console variable. It's kind of like the thing in Unreal that allows you to kind of go around the rendering system, and you can tell it to like do things better. And at the end of the day, we ended up path tracing this show in Unreal, but path tracing was brand new when we kind of set out on this journey. And it was one of the kind of the biggest challenges that we had to overcome. So as a studio, we start off every project, as I imagine every animated project starts off, we start off with concept. And then this is kind of where our process is maybe a little bit different. We then jump into something that we call white boxing, which is just kind of laying out very rough versions of the environment. There's no textures, we're just kind of slapping stuff together. We do the same thing for our characters. And the reason that we do this is because we're trying to get onto stage as fast as possible. And so at AGBO, we have a Mocap stage with a big giant screen in there that we use kind of like a whiteboard or a monitor to kind of look at the work that we're doing. And we jump onto stage and we start figuring out the scale of things and our story. And so one of the first things that we do is a location scout. And so Patrick Osborne, the director, came onto stage, and we have virtual cameras that we throw on our shoulder, and we start to look at the scene, start to block things out. And at this point, it's all really rough. We're just trying to figure out like space and like, can these two giant characters fit in this kitchen? No, we need to move the wall a little bit. And it's all very rough at this point. We're just like kind of working with clay. And so we brought him onto the set, and we have it kind of taped out on the floor, and we look at the set together and walk through it, and he's like, yeah, maybe the hallway is a little bit longer, maybe we need to move this wall in the kitchen, and those kind of things. And then the next thing that we do is we kind of start like a very rough boarding process with Patrick. Patrick was able to do these like really rough boards just to kind of like give us an idea of what we would be doing when we got to set. We were able to put together our shot list, and then we go onto stage. And this is what our shoots look like when we shoot.
So cool. So yeah, that was the mocap shoot for the show. Just to rewind back to a little bit, like Ryan was talking about, you know, myself being visualization supervisor, kind of in charge of, you know, putting the scenes together and looking at the storyboards. We did start to do some blocking immediately in engine. In addition to like the scouting session, we would also, you know, we get the suits on internally, start to kind of work things out, kind of stand up and edit. And then obviously, by doing that, you're just that much more prepared going into the mocap shoot. You've already kind of, you know what the shots are. You've already kind of scouted the set. So then the next step is, you know, we have the shoot, and then after that, we've then captured all the performance. As you saw in the video, we were, you know, running camera at the same time. So we are thinking about composition and staging while we're shooting, but then we also know, because we're capturing all the performance, that we can always go back and do more camera design on top of it. So it's kind of a simultaneous collaboration just between, you know, the director there being on set, the actors. I myself was running camera, and just to be able to kind of understand what the director is looking for, which is very helpful. Just to compare it to like more traditional ways of doing things. I'd done tons of previs, you know, using just kind of traditional keyframed animation with some mocap, but you know, since joining AGBO, it's just been a lot of fun just to be able to go out on stage and kind of treat it more like a live action shoot, and just to kind of, you just get, I don't know, there's a synergy that happens when you're, you know, with the director, with a camera, with live actors. You can just start to make decisions and discuss things so much faster, as opposed to, you know, giving notes, waiting on animation, you know, coming back around and going back to it. So I found that really refreshing on this project. One of the other things, and I'm just going to show a little clip of what it looked like, but after we shot it, we had all the performance, and then we started assembling stuff. But then in addition to that, excuse me, I basically would, pardon me, there were these sessions with the director that we would do in our screening room, where because we were in Unreal Engine, it was, you know, a real-time process where I would sit in the back we had our editor there, but then we also had the entire timeline, you know, in engine with sound, and I basically would go through, play through the edit, and dive into shots, make the adjustments to the camera, pop back out, review it, and actually I'll just play some of this. So this is kind of what it looked like, but you'll see that we had the full timeline with the sound from the final piece. Some of the models were, you know, at a previous stage just for performance, but as you can see, if you're familiar with the piece, it was, you know, these were the shots. So basically, being able to scrub, get feedback from the director right then and there. As you can see here, this is just me like popping in, adjusting a camera, hearing it with the dialogue, and these are things that I've done for years, but more traditionally, you'd have to, you know, you'd be in Maya, you'd run a play blast, you'd go over to the Avid, load in the clip, cut it in. So there was a lot more, you know, time to do that. But since this was instantaneous, it was just, you know, you got there that much faster.
Automate.
So yeah, I think you'll see a couple more shots, but that was a lot of fun. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to Rain.
Thank you. All right, I will be talking about the texturing and the look development that I did on this project. Mainly, I will be focusing on the clothing of the characters Todd and Margie, which is these two lovely ones, and lovely. And I will be hitting some notes that I wrote already in this panel. So one of them was how dirty these characters are. And in order to really figure that out, I remember that was something that we needed to figure out on Margie especially, and we had to actually dial it back at some point. And it's something that you have when you are doing texturing or look development, is putting yourself in the head of the character. What is their lifestyle? What type of activities they have? And all of these will determine how you're going to texture your model. Another one is also distance from the camera. For example, I will show a turntable, and we will talk a little bit more about that, but places that are closer to the camera will require more detail. And that happens also with assets in an environment. If you have a bunch of assets in a room, but you have a bunch that are really far, they don't need necessarily to be as detailed. So that kind of also can play in your character. A lot of the shots we have in this show is from the perspective of a robot and a cat. So that required the texture from the bottom of these characters to be a little bit more heavy. And the second thing I want to talk about is about Todd, and that's the different stain versus the different material. So here, for example, Todd's clothes is this jersey that is made of polyester. So again, thinking about your character was, for example, what type of stain this character will have. Ketchup, mayo, is it going to be grease, is it going to be, like kind of thinking about all of these and then putting that together with the material you will use, because in CG, even if it's stylized, you still have to refer to real world. And for example, the grease stain on polyester is different, is going to act physically different than cotton, let's say. The edges are going to be sharper, it's more shiny, and all of that you have to keep in consideration even when you're stylizing it. So that's why I'm talking about the difference of, first off, the type of stain, and second, the type of material your character have. Another one that we actually had to tackle with Ryan was the holes of his jersey. We went multiple different versions of this. One of it was, sorry? I said I'm sorry. That's okay, Ryan, I forgive you. I'm kidding. But it was actually really fascinating to think outside of the box a bit, because at first we went fully like a real jersey. It had holes, it had opacity, and then we were like, okay, do we really need to calculate all of that opacity and the geo that is underneath this cloth? And we didn't. So what we ended up doing is I just went in and I made those holes, made the hole, and inside of it I just made a layer that was darker, so it kind of gave the illusion that this jersey actually has holes in it. So thinking creatively of how you approach your materials and how you can creatively basically save time for the whole team is very important. So those were things that we had to tackle on these characters. This is a little turntable of our very clean Todd. And here, I'm gonna talk about something that is really fun, is when you're a look development artist, you can hide a lot of little nuggets of information in your character. For example, story is very important, and in this character, I wanted to bring him back and tie him back to the environment and the story. And for who has, I don't know if you guys have watched this episode, I guess you did. If you have, the cat is obsessed with tuna. And so I was like, okay, we're gonna bring Todd back to this. So there's a lot of tuna pattern actually on his shoe. And that was something I remember showing to Ryan, and he was laughing, and he was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So it's kind of little things that you have to think, okay, what is the story? How can I bring this to this character? As well as, again, going back to the texturing being more heavy because of the camera being lower in a bunch of shots. He actually has a bunch of stitches that were done in Substance Painter with the path tool, just basically paying more attention to how your characters are supposed to move in the scene. And another one, a little tip, is, you know how I said, like, think about your character, is each character is so different, like in character design world, some of them have long arms, some have short. You have to think like them, and I was thinking, where can she reach? Where in her body can she like put the stain off? So all of the texturing on her seemed like it is like realistic, because you know you're gonna see saturated on like the thigh, on like where she eats, and like the food drops. So just paying attention to that. And before I move the mic to Natalie, I wanted to add that the texturing, modeling, animation, all of these that are done by amazing artists are really put forward by the awesome lighting team and what they do. Because, you know, if it's dark, you can't even really see it. So you guys are awesome. So I'm gonna pass now this to you.
Thank you, Rain. Well, we need something to light, so. Okay, so I did lighting for a couple scenes in Larger Than Robots. Okay. So I have a background in painting, and I've always kind of seen, or I've been drawn to lighting because it's kind of like painting but with light, and it really is, I just think it's the part of the process where you really bring things to life. And Unreal makes it really easy for you to do that because you can just jump right in and start lighting. But because of that, it also comes with its own challenges. You want to race to the end of the line and then realize that there's a number of CVARs that are keeping your project from working. So that was a lot of trial and error that we went through. This was my first project or professional project in Unreal, so there was a lot of things to learn. And I really learned that it's a balance of getting your settings right and then while keeping in with the art direction. So it just becomes a whole back and forth. Is it playing? Okay. So here's an example of just how easy it is to jump into your shot and look at the scene with all the lighting in it. You wouldn't be able to really do that in a traditional program like Maya or traditional VFX. So what we would do is assemble all of the assets together, like you can see here in Sequencer, in these different subsequences, and start the lighting in Lumen. We did everything in path tracing, but we would try and get most of the way there in Lumen, but it can only get you so far. But we would kind of set it up like this, and then move on to path tracing. And this way, it's super easy to navigate through the scene and kind of get you most of the way there, or at least 75%. Okay, then you move on to the painstaking process of path tracing, which is, at Gnomon I was a generalist, and so we work with V-Ray most of the time, so it's what we're used to. So I'm kind of used to that process, but after working in Lumen and working with a scene like that, it is kind of painful to go back to rendering like this. But here's just an example of kind of what it looked like. And here I want to talk about kind of starting out as a new lighter, especially in Unreal, what I learned as far as like the fundamentals of lighting. And my first lighting teacher here told me something that I never forgot, which is, like, I guess a lot of people tend to forget how to light something as simple like a primitive, like a cube or a sphere, and it really is all about the rim light, the fill light, and the key light. And if you don't have that, then your scene kind of feels a little flat. And so what I always try to do is to keep those three fundamental things in mind, and that really gets you most of the way there if you can nail that little part. The rest on top is just like fun frosting. Let's see. Over time, one of the big challenges was learning just how to light the fur and to really bring it to life. And in the end, I found that I was using point or spotlights a lot, and really what he needed was just like a nicely placed rec light right behind him to bring him out from the background. And kind of like discovering that was really exciting, because it was like, oh my God, he's singing, looks great. Okay, next one. Oh, so on to one of our more unexpected challenges, which was the eye light in Sanchez's eye. Sanchez is the cat. And the sclera is it's so glossy that it reflects absolutely everything in the scene. And in the room, we'll have like tons of lights, and so his eyes would just be going crazy in all the renders. And we tried to come up with different ways of fixing it. And in Unreal, there's only so many lights that you can link together, and there's so many channels, or only so many ways you can control the specularity on things. And so it was a challenge for a while. What we decided to do was to try out this simple little ping light, where we would replace the sclera in all of the shots and control it from there. So it really was like a totally fake light, that little light that you see in his eye. But that ended up being the solution. Here's an example of how that works. So what we do is we built into the shader these different parameters to control like the ping size and the fall off and the color even, and then the placement. And so all of the lighters would put that in. We would have, anytime there was Sanchez in the scene, we had this in here, and then we would kind of key it or control it from there. And we ended up, it worked out. So I'll show you the next. Here's an example, and I have more examples, but On the left side, on the left side, you can see there's like a ton of reflection in his eyes, and this is kind of a minor example. We have other ones where it was just going crazy. And on the right is kind of where we settled, on the humble little ping, and it ended up working really well. So I was really happy about that. Let's see. Okay, then I wanted to talk about, as a lighter, of course, you have dailies, and for Love, Death, and Robots, I had about 40 shots to handle, which for your first project in Unreal, that's a lot. And what you'll find is, you light a shot, and then as you keep going through your sequence and lighting all the other shots, by the end, your color is totally different and you don't realize it. So I kind of built this script in Nuke that all the lighters could use, and you would just update it kind of every day or every time you had a new render, and then we put out these contact sheets to review in dailies. And it was really important for keeping like consistency across all of the shots, and then also, well, I had another point, but I forgot. But it's for keeping consistency across the shots. Then I also wanted to show just kind of like what the kind of things that you'll get as a lighter, which is sometimes you'll get like a paint over or something, and that's exactly what they want you to match. And I remember this one and a couple other shots, it was super important to match this certain type of light that he had, even though it was impossible in that world. I actually think it's more fun when you try to break. I mean, it's like reality kind of went out the window with some of these, because the people just wanted like a certain type of look. And so we'd have to pull all these sorts of stunts to get that look. But it is a lot of fun, because then you don't have to adhere to like the real world rules. Oh, that was it? Okay. So last thing, I just wanted to leave it with saying that as a new lighter, like the big things I learned, especially just having lit for a minute now, is, I'll find that I'll use, especially as a new lighter, you use like 10 lights, where a more experienced person will use like 2. And it's kind of crazy how they can accomplish the same thing with much fewer lights. So I found myself, I'd get notes back, and then the scene would be like overlit, and you can't tell, you could just tell something doesn't feel right. And so I'd often go back into this sequencer and turn off all of my lights and start from scratch, and then just try to get everything down as much as I could. And I'm trying to chase like, if you can light it with like 4 lights, first of all, it's better on render time, but then it's just easier on the whole workflow and everything. So I absolutely love working on this project, and I would light these 2 guys a million times over. So there we go.
That was really, really cool. I guess to kick off the Q&A here, can you talk about some of those specific challenges in doing this all in Unreal? Because it's a pretty new workflow still compared to Maya or 3ds Max or other things. So would you mind elaborating on some of that?
I'll start with what I had to run into, and then obviously Ryan can talk about other things. But for me, because I just talked about cameras and motion capture and stuff like that, which that was the easy part. I think just learning how to use it when you're going from stage and going into layout, and because that was kind of a big process after we did previs, after we did mocap, and then it's just standing all the shots up, right? So, and obviously the way we set this up, each department kind of had their subsequence, assuming you guys have used Unreal, but you basically have a master sequence that's like the container for the shot. So just wrapping your head around how to manage that, how to deal with perforce. It's also very buggy. We also we're pushing all the latest features. We were using control rig, so we would retarget onto the characters, and then just dealing with really just managing the scenes to pass to lighting. And it was really good timing because actually Natalie joined us and spent a little bit of time with me in layout, just setting up the shots. So it was good because we kind of ramped up and kind of had a game plan. But basically every show that I've done in this program so far, we've sort of tweaked it every time just because it's kind of a little bit of a moving target. But just stability and just the way it works is just so different than, say, Maya, and just how you organize it, how you know, there's no referencing, it's sort of referencing, and obviously it's a game engine, so I think for me, those were a lot of the big challenges.
Yeah, I just also want to say, like, shout out to our pipeline team and like everybody at our studio. I think that the biggest thing about, the biggest difference with our studio or a studio that works in Unreal is that everybody has to be so much more technical than normally, because everybody's got to have at least a basic understanding of how the whole system works. Where I feel like, you know, if you're an animator and you pop into Maya, like, and that's all you do, all you need to know are the animation tools in Maya, and it's a very different program. But at the same time, what it brings is the ability for all of us to like work collaboratively together in real time, which is insane. But we also have to be, all of this stuff is brand new. You know, every time we do a project, there's some new thing going on that we're like, well, we have to have that. And so we're just constantly on the bleeding edge of this program, which is, you know, hard for a pipeline team to deal with. Yeah.
Did you guys start in 4 and then go to 5, or did you guys just straight go to 5?
Yeah, we were in 5.3. Yeah.
Oh, right. Wow, that's crazy.
But there were a lot of features. You know, of course, every single time we start a project, they're always like, "Oh yeah, and there's this new thing that's going to solve everything," and it's just coming out. But and a lot of times, you know, and that's again, like, you know, again, kudos to the pipeline team and just everybody on our team. Just the ability to be willing to jump in and use the latest thing and not be afraid, and that's kind of just how you have to approach it, just because it is such a different thing. And we're also building the pipeline as we go, because in itself, it's a pipeline. You know, it's not like other DCCs where it's tried and true and you've done it a certain way. You know, there's so many different ways to organize it, and anyway, so.
The train is coming and you're built on the tracks as the train is coming down.
Yeah, for sure.
Rain, I wanted to ask you about the texturing, because one thing you said that I really love, which is that, you know, the textures tell a story, and as well, Natalie, with the lighting. Can you talk about, like, guys, like how lighting and material kind of tells that story for you? Both of you. It's a double. It's a double.
I start first? Wait, okay. Well, there's a lot of storytelling into texturing, a lot. And you can tell when somebody is really putting their mind in the head of the character or even an asset, like thinking about how this is actually functioning. It just brings everything together. So for example, on an object, not just characters, let's say a tiled floor, if you destroy the path that, let's say, this old man every day walks to go to the sink, if you make the roughness difference or you make it more dirty, all of this is already storytelling. And same with the character. If you make their clothes a certain way dirty, or even there's like areas that is a little bit chopped up, all of this is telling a story with like their attitude, their cleanness, their habits. And now I'm going to pass the mic to you and see what you have to add. You got this.
Thanks, Rain. Okay, so with lighting, these I put up here because they're some of my favorite shots. For storytelling, especially on a show like this where you're not really sticking to real life, you're just trying to make it super dramatic, that was the most fun part. Like this one here on the lower right, they wanted this like Godfather look where he's going through the light, and that took so long and so many blockers to get him, because it's not real. Like there's no way he can go through a light like that. But being able, or setting that up and kind of like working on getting him in there was a lot of fun. And then as far as storytelling goes, just like playing around with light color, you know, we are sticking to a color script, but then, you know, you're also kind of balancing, like here we've got blue and orange, you know, and just kind of, like what I was trying to go for in these shots was to get like a super moody, kind of like night, dark, foggy look. And the reason I chose this one on the lower left to show is because it has that, I don't know, it has that like quiet, kind of hazy, like really dark kind of look to it. I don't know if that's answering the storytelling question, but.
Yeah, that's absolutely a part of that. Color and light, and it's all there for the story.
I just wanted to quickly add one little note about the storytelling that I'm sure all of you guys will agree with is either texturing, lighting, any other department is you want to leave the audience wanting more, or like, you know, when you see a forum, somebody stopping on each frame and be like, oh, did you see this little texture? This is like so cool that they thought about this. All of this is because the person is thinking about the story. And at the end of the day, we just all want to tell a story and captivate the audience. So yeah.
I often heard it said that every department is the storytelling department.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's open it up to questions in the audience. MJ is going to be walking around with the padded mic. It's a cube. It's a mic and it's a cube, so be gentle. Be gentle with it. Okay, we go. Yeah.
We got. And just keep your hand up, I'll find you.
Thank you so much. Hello, this is working. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have all this knowledge here, and you guys are very generous to give this out for free, and it's a beautiful thing to share. I have a dumb sequencer question, and I'll save all my other dumb questions for a bunch of other people, but my dumb sequencer question is that I saw in your sequencer for Unreal, you have all your shots spliced together in sequencer one after another, meaning that if I was the director and I wanted to change shot 3 to actually be shot 17 and re-edit the sequence and the timing, does that mean that your rigging pipeline and that your animation pipeline has to totally rearrange? Or is your sequencer pipeline very adaptable to editing and direction changes in Unreal?
Check. It's no different than like a non-linear editor, you know, like in Premiere or anything like that, because basically we have a tool where we create all of our shots, we render them out, and then then we have a way of exporting them back into Unreal, and then it rebuilds the timeline with each individual shot. So yeah, you can do whatever you want. You could duplicate it, you could make a new shot, you could go in and, you know, change the animation in one, and then what we would do is, if things got too complicated, because it was just me, you know, keyframing it, luckily in a situation like this, the characters, at least at the stage I was doing it, it was just chess piecing things, and we were just trying to get all the angles. But I would just kick it over to our editor that had the actual edit, and then he could play with it there as a way to kind of save time, and then I would be prepping stuff. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward setup. It's called a shot instead of a level sequence. So if you're ever, you know, you'll see it's a shot track versus a camera cut track inside of a level sequence. But yeah, but it does have to be, you know, at the very end, I couldn't do it just with all the hair and the, you know, with the path tracing and all the setup. So you do have to keep it kind of light in the beginning. So.
Hi, my name is Dominic Bruyere. I wanted to ask to all of you, what was the most frustrating thing you had to either render or light or compose? Anyway, what was the most frustrating?
I will tell you the most frustrating thing, and that was that those scenes get really heavy, and by the end, you know, I showed like a little thing of the path tracing, but that took so long, and that was the most frustrating. That, and then those CVARs are no joke. You'll render something where it looks fine in Engine, and then you render it out, and you have no idea why it doesn't look like that, and it's just a hunt to go find. And we're still dealing with that. But for this project, it was how heavy that hair really got, and that's kind of being able to set it up in Lumen first. It wasn't that bad, so that's also where Unreal shines.
on the texturing side, I don't have much to reply about that because I really enjoyed every part, and I wouldn't call it frustrating. I would just call it challenging for me. Because there's a moment that you just have to think, okay, this is not working, what do I do? But that will be almost everything you work on. There's a moment of, how can I make this better? But there wasn't necessarily for me a moment that I necessarily freaked on one of the parts.
Okay, go ahead.
One thing I want to mention though, off of what Natalie just said, I am an old person and I've been doing this for a long time, and it's so funny when our artists are like, oh God, it takes so long to render. Because when I started in this business, like I would literally wait like 5 days for like a 24 frame shot, and you'd get it and you'd be like, oh shit. The matte, I didn't turn the matte off on that or whatever. These shots, they did take much longer, obviously, than Lumen. You know, some of them, I don't know, took 24 hours. Like some of them were pretty crazy. But some of them were also really complicated. The most frustrating, I think, thing in this piece for me was the rain. And it was only frustrating because we went through glass, and it was just, you know, there are things that you run into in Unreal that are just kind of difficult, and one always is glass and refraction and the rain going through the glass, and so that shot became a comp shot. And I hate comping. I want to do everything in Engine because you can, and so I hate when we comp shots, and so that shot is my most annoying shot.
My experience is pretty good. I don't have any really, really bad things that I can think of. But I will say, and I wasn't necessarily responsible for this, but I did help with this and was around this, but the deliverables on some of these projects. So, you know, a lot of times you don't just deliver the final picture, right? Like you have to do mats for DI and all these different things. So, and obviously because we have a furry cat and we're path tracing, and so in order to get proper mats for everything, it's not as simple as it would be in V-Ray or another, you know, Arnold. So that in itself was almost more work than rendering the piece, just because we had to do color mats for each character. And we had to come up with ways in our pipeline to be able to handle all these utility mats and tracking the stuff. And again, we didn't, you know, just to get a little bit into the details, you know, because Unreal using Perforce and version control and all this kind of stuff, you know, that's one of the hardest things to deal with, is like going from a versionless system, which is more of what Unreal's designed to do, to a version system where you want to be able to look at any single render and say, okay, I know exactly what version of each thing. And that happens to people all the time, where they say, you know, well, you just got to keep moving forward. You just don't look back. You know, you basically just don't go back to old versions. But anyway, that was a big thing. And then just, you know, we had to have a render farm to render all this stuff in a timely manner. And just, you know, we had an incredible team that was just there all the time, just helping us keep these machines running. And just because of the size of the graphics cards, and, you know, a whole, you know, 20 to 30 A6000 machines, where, you know, just to even handle it. So yeah, I would say that was definitely one of the challenges.
Yeah, I'm a big tools guy, and I was wondering if there were any tools that you felt like maybe were developed for the show, or that AGBO has that you're like, I can't live without this anymore.
Yeah, pretty much all of them, actually. I mean, there's, you know, obviously just the I/O between Maya, Houdini, obviously, because with these characters, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have any of our folks from the CFX or FX team, but, you know, these characters were, you know, fully simulated in Houdini for the cloth and skin and whatnot. So just the load, you know, just the whole ecosystem of being able to like publish. You know, we are tracking everything through ShotGrid, and I call it ShotGrid because I'm old too. Anyway, but basically just keeping track of all that stuff, and then having, you know, the tools to pull it in, to have metadata, that for every shot we could then go back and check the versions, because we're constantly iterating, because when you have these subsequences where you have a camera, you have lighting, you have environment, and those things can all be changed on the fly. We would go to stage, shoot more shots. That's the one thing about Unreal. It's amazing, but it's also you can literally tweak stuff until the very last second. So yeah, just a lot of the tools for tracking versions, versioning up, just making your lives easier. Some of the animation stuff we're still working on, like a lot of it's with control rig, going from animation clips, baking it to control rig, going back, all those things. And they're kind of, it's a little flaky, like with Python and the way it deals with Unreal. So we are lucky to have a couple of guys that can do some C++ stuff for the heavy lifting things. So yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. Could you share a bit more about the motion capture process, or any suggestions for cleanup? Have you used Maya to clean up, or it was all mostly in Unreal? Have you used blend shapes for facial animation? So just a bit more about the complexity of how did you achieve that fantastic look.
Yeah, for the motion capture, we have an Optitrax system, which is, was great for what we used it for. It's very simple, very easy to use. And things have come a long way. Like when I first started doing this with motion capture, basically, we ran everything through Motion Builder, and you had to have custom plugins on for everything. And I was using a Vicon system at the time, and just getting all that stuff into Engine was a real pain. But now it's so much easier. And actually, we're embracing Unreal as much as possible, and we don't even use Motion Builder unless we really need to. We've used it on a couple of projects just to do our retargeting when we have a lot of data to go through. But a lot of it's just, marker placement, spending a little more time when you're capturing things, really trying to get, things working in real time on the day. And then luckily, because a lot of this is stylized and we're running it through animation, it's less important. We're not doing a photoreal show where we have to match it into a plate with other humans. I think when you start to get into that realm is when it gets, much more complicated. But yeah, I think right now we're doing it in Unreal, but then we do some cleanup in Maya. We do, for retargeting, we've kind of have it's a very simple system, but the idea is that you kind of bind the mocap skeleton to the control rig with offsets. So as an animator, it's very simple because you load the mocap data onto the skeleton, and then you have offsets so that you can actually kind of adjust the retarget in real time and see it, and then you bake it down to the control rig, or you can bake it down from the beginning. But it's just very flexible, and it's not too complicated. So at the end of the day, a lot of it's just an eye for animation, and there's really no magic bullet yet. Obviously we've been looking at AI and image-based capture and all the different things, but yeah, so far it's just been kind of keeping it simple.
Do you guys ever utilize Blender as well? Or is it always solely within Unreal Engine?
Yeah, our asset lead is huge Blender guy, loves Blender. So yeah, for final rendering, no. All of our rendering and our pipeline for rendering and everything we do is Unreal, but we use it every day for texturing. We've been doing a little bit of rigging for some game assets recently in there, but not ever for rendering. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. So for lighting, the question is, when are you sort of breaking the rules of reality to achieve a visual aesthetic? So for example, maybe adding blocks of light where there might not make sense in an environment, or maybe amplifying where they might not make sense. Just and sort of how does that problem-solving process look like?
Hello. So most of the time you want to stick to reality as much as you can, or what would make sense, Where I find when we break it is when the creative director or whoever it is that's, well, he's our creative director, but it wasn't Ryan. It was whoever's above him, or what's his name? Whoever's doing it, yeah. So when they're like, no, I want this look, and then you just have to break reality to get it. But typically, like if I was doing my own thing, I would try and stick, and I do try to stick to reality as much as possible. But if you're doing something that's more stylized and you're just having fun with it, then it's okay. Typically though, I mean, I feel like on the last 2 projects, I've been told to break reality, and you know, it's just like continuity's out the window, and this is a crazy world. And you know, typically I feel like you don't like want to do that. That only happens when you get told, right? If you want like do you have anything to say on that?
I would say all the time. I mean, because like when you look at a shot, like the way that light falls on a face, or if you have a rim light, or if you have, you know, the whole 3-point lighting system is not real, you know? So like we try to light like, okay, the light's coming through the window, we try to light like naturalistically for the scene. Like if the window's over here, you want your key light to be coming through the window. But like we're always cheating it because it looks better.
One more thing on that. You know, one of the things on the last project that I think I talked to Ryan like a couple times because I just wasn't getting it. I really do try to stick to reality. Maybe that's a Natalie thing. But like, you know, the director for the thing we were working on typically lights in a certain way. And you have to break reality to get that. And it took me so long to like do that because it was like, sometimes, I mean, it's just, and you kind of, because you have a filmmaking background, so you kind of taught me like, yeah, like in film, when they have backlighting all the time, they're filming at a different time of the day, but it's in the same scene. They're like back to back. I never noticed that, but yeah, so I think that also comes with it, just experience and knowing all of that. So maybe you know, maybe I'm the one who sticks to reality.
So, question for Rain and Natalie. What was it like coming from Gnomon? So, like, you guys are like, your students, you got class and workload, and then to go from that to like real world studio environment. Can you guys talk about that transition?
You want to start first? You want to start first?
You want me to start first?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, okay. I'll gather mine right now. What was it like going from Gnomon to working? It was amazing. It was awesome. It was awesome. I mean, you're working 24/7 here, and then when I got my first job at Outpost right away, it was like, you're off at 6 and I'm done. I'm not doing anything. And it was amazing. The transition was, the other thing that was amazing was having like production. Like when you're in school, you don't have producers, you're your own producer. And I still love production, having like a team of people whose job it is to make sure that you're on track and to tell you like, turn this in for dailies and you're done. I love that. That was just like, just not having to like work for only yourself and like these big projects against yourself for best of term. You know, it's just, and then getting regular feedback through dailies all the time. It was awesome. So, yeah, it was okay. I mean, it wasn't that hard. It was pretty great.
I'm sure sleep is nice too, yeah?
Oh, amazing.
I do agree. It's fantastic to start your first job. And the most fun part is definitely the team side, because you have people that have your back. All of you guys want to make this project happen. And it's good that whenever you're stuck, there's always like somebody in the studio you can be like, hey, like, how do I do this? Or what do you think about this? And it's great. You feel like you guys all together to make this happen. It's fantastic. And also you get paid, so it's great.
That's a big part of it. We got a great question online about, you talked about keeping color consistency from kind of like shot to shot. Mm-hmm. How did you go about that? Did you, you said you brought the renders in Nuke? Or?
Oh yeah, we made like a contact sheet template. Like I had it up. I don't want to navigate, it's gonna take forever. But it was necessary because you're juggling like 20 shots for each scene. And like in shot grid, you can kind of view them all at once, but I'm also a nuke person. I have a compositing background also. And I really want to see it all right in front of me, and I want to be able to like mess with it and, you know, and then build my own contact sheet. So for maintaining that consistency, yes, I brought them all into nuke so I can have the most control over it. And also just being able to see all of them at once, like right as your render is done, or as you're doing test renders or whatever. And that also became necessary when I realized after lighting a bunch of shots that this shot doesn't look anything like the first one, because just naturally you're gonna like move away from it. And so, did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why do you think that is? That like your brain moves away from like, because you said you started lighting in a certain way,
Yeah.
and then you notice like several shots down the line, you're like, where am I?
I think it's like, okay, so what I started doing after this is, like in the last project we did, is I would string all of my shots together so that in Unreal I'm constantly jumping between all of my shots and lighting them at the same time. This one I hadn't quite done that. Also, it was a little bit hard because it gets really heavy at the end. And so when you're just going one by one and you're opening it up, like, I don't know about you guys, but I forget the second I see something. And so by the time I get 5 shots down, you know, I'm like copying and pasting lighting, and you just can't, I can't remember them back to back. So it was like, I think it just happens. At least it does for me, you know, maybe it does it for other people. But
Everybody. Yeah.
Well, it's like that's the only way you can.
yeah, it's the only way you can see it. And we'd be in dailies, and, you know, I'd have all my shots up, and it'd be like Ryan and Andy, and one of them is green and one of them is blue, and they're like, what the hell happened here? In a nice way, but it was like, okay, yeah, I really got to start looking at all of them together.
Other questions? We got one.
So this should be shorter question, should be. It might be long, I don't know. I was curious how long it takes start to finish for you guys to do a project like this, and also the actual team size for something as well.
Yeah. This project was honestly a luxury, because typically for us, like, we do a lot of game cinematics. Last year we did a game cinematic where the company came to us 8 weeks before the Game Awards, and they were like, we don't have a script or anything, can you guys make something? And we did it. And typically that's how it is, but luckily, like, Blur knows what's up. They have done this for years and years, and I think for us, because we were working in Unreal, we're moving a little bit faster than they're used to. So I felt like, I don't know how you guys felt, but like, I felt like the time that we had on this was a luxury. We started in December and delivered in August. I feel like we could have gone faster.
So well, it was very well planned out. Also, like Patrick Osborne, the director, I mean, he had boarded it. There wasn't a lot of exploration, because that can usually make things go longer. Sometimes people don't know what they want. You might have to do, you know, 30 versions of it in previs, and then, you know, it slips into final, and you might have to go back. But no, it was pretty. It was very nice.
Also, real quick, I just want to say shout out to Delano. Is Delano in here? Delano was rigger on this show, and he's the best. How many people in here have worked at AGBO? Can you put your hands up? 2, 3? We got 1 right now. Cool. 4. They keep popping up. I was just curious.
Other?
Well, yeah. I had a question kind of about the show as a whole. Did you guys have any, like, I know it's an anthology and the episodes aren't entirely related, but did you guys have any, like, structural or design or, like, tonal goalposts that you guys had to be, like, aware of or keep in mind while you were designing and making the story?
Yeah, I mean, we had a color script. I think overall, it's just, I think that the level of work on the series is so high, and we were going into this about to do a cat with like millions of teeny tiny little hairs, and I was terrified that this was not going to work because path tracing was brand new, and we were new to that much hair. I mean, there wasn't anything to look at. It wasn't like, oh, cool, they've done this before, so we know we can do it. So there was this like period of, like I showed you, just like research and development on it to make sure that we could hit the level of the show. Yeah.
Wow. Any other question? Other folks? Yeah, see.
I know that the difference between like Unreal and an offline render is already touched on a little bit, but are there other like, did you have to like optimize like geometry? Did you guys have to use LODs? Like was there, or was it a lot freer than you thought it would be?
I think we kind of maybe make the mistake of not, like.
We could be better.
Yeah, we could be better. A lot of times, you know, we want that fidelity, and we push things as far as they will go, which is, you know, fine early on, and then towards the end when you're like, everything in here is a million polygons, and now we're dealing with it.
Yeah, I mean, we had, you know, we were trying to use VATs for, you know, vertex animation for some of the deformations and stuff, but it just became too much of an issue, and it wouldn't work with path tracing. So you would you'd find these optimizations, but then you'd find that it didn't work in path tracing, just because it's a game engine. Lumen is, you know, a first-class citizen. I feel like, you know, path tracing they've kind of thrown in there. I don't, you know, I'm curious to see if they continue to support it. I mean, I hope they do, but if you look at it, it's kind of like a render from, you know, 20 years ago almost, just in terms of the, you know, just the control that you have over it. So yeah, I mean, we would try, but we could have absolutely done better. But like Ryan said, I mean, once we get into that stage, we're not really concerned as long as it'll push through on the render side. But anyway.
Can you talk a little bit about, because you guys are kind of like breaking ground as you're moving forward. Can you talk about like, I guess like the R&D aspect of this, where you know you'd gone over it a little bit with the hair and some of that, but can you dive in a little deeper?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things is like, I feel like every project we do has some new thing that we are unsure if Unreal can do it. The last project that we did was like massive amounts of water, in big scale water spilling through city streets, and it was like, God, that's gonna be tough, because everything that's been done in Unreal so far has been done for video games, and you handle all of those problems in a much different way. And so we all come from like VFX backgrounds, so we're trying to bring that stuff into the engine and figure out like new ways to do it. Like Scott said, we use VATs. Oftentimes we also use Lumen because we don't want to wait on these renders, and we're like, it's the reason we're in Unreal, is to move fast. So most of the time, unless we have a Persian cat, we're not path tracing. And a lot of those things, you know, VATs and what's a thing that we've been using lately? I can't remember what it's called. The thing out of Houdini that like shrinks everything down.
Well, it's just the different VDB set. You know, there's all kinds of new things, like there's Zebra VDB, all these different new formats. And, you know, luckily we have a, you know, really talented Houdini guy that's doing a lot of R&D and looking at ways of, you know, like exporting things out of Houdini in terms of particles that can be Niagara particles. And then, anyway, so that's probably like the deepest, like technical R&D. I mean, I kind of touched on a little bit of what, for me, it's just, I'm, you know, having done previs for a very long time and on really big movies where we just really have to crank things out. In fact, Delano and I have worked together for many, many years on some huge shows, so he knows what I'm talking about. But just trying to bring that organization into the engine was the biggest challenge for me. And it's not as, it's not like super technical, but it's more of a workflow problem. And also just trying to help design the tools and kind of steer some of that was challenging, and a lot of mistakes, like a lot of like trying things like, oh, let's try to set up the shots this way and use this naming convention, and then you hit a wall. And then kind of coming back, but there's a lot there, like with perforce and version control. Like I feel like those are some things that we need to get into in terms, because a lot of it's also scalability. It's not as easy just to deploy, to a huge team, especially if they don't know how to use it. Because Ryan had mentioned, like, you kind of have to be technical, a little more. It's a little more tedious just in terms of not wanting to break things, or just dealing with it, because it's just a different animal. So. You guys have any? What did you say?
You had talked a little bit also early on about the blocking process, like early on. Can you tell us like how important it is to just plan everything out early on as fast as possible?
Yes. I've spent my whole career doing it, so
Yeah.
it's to me, obviously, I'm going to say it's very, very, very important. Yeah. But there's also, just depends. The most fun part is just being able to kind of like, when directors don't know what they want, and then you get a chance to kind of put on your director hat and try a bunch of different things. But no, I think that helps everything, because it just trickles all the way downstream. Then you're not building stuff you don't need to build. You can have something, even if it's wrong, at least you have some things to start out and have a discussion about, and then you can start to understand, like, okay, well, this shot, maybe it's easy if it's like this, it's a close-up versus a wide, and there's just nothing like seeing it. And obviously, currently, we're kind of really hitting that, where we're going into these new worlds and designing stuff, and I feel like that's where it's even more important. Just because if you look at concept art, concept art's great. It's a great place to start. Storyboards are great, as long as people are engaged with them. If they're just drawing storyboards and the director isn't looking at them and no one's really paying attention to them, then it's like, okay, maybe they're not as important. But I think as long as everybody's kind of gathering around it and focused on those things, I think it's very critical.
Real quick, I also just want to blow Scott up real quick. This dude is a legend. Scott was visual effects supervisor on Tron, Ready Player One, Wakanda Forever. What did I say? No, I didn't. I don't think I said visual effects supervisor. Visualization supervisor. But he's awesome.
Hell yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think if there are any other last questions, just want to make sure everyone gets one through. If you got.
Oh, hello. Thank you for taking the time and sharing all the insight you've had on this project. This is for like students and newer artists, and I hope like maybe all of you can share some insight. What are certain attitudes you think newer artists should gain while trying to break into the industry and breaking into the industry as we start to learn to new environments? And maybe you've seen that, like you feel like newer artists can improve on.
That's so tough, because everybody's an individual and everybody comes with their own like attitude. I think you have a great attitude. I think you come in, you're like, you really want to learn and you really want to like know how everything works. And I think like just being open to like seeing how it all works, because I think like when we're in school, like God, when I was in school, I thought this industry operated so much different than it really does. Like when you get into it, you're like, oh, like everybody's gonna be a pro and like we're gonna get there and they're gonna know what they're doing, and nobody knows what they're doing. Like we're all in here every day just like, I don't know why it won't work. I have no idea, it just won't render. And like we're all trying to figure it out together. And don't be scared to like pull up a tutorial, like do it. Like we're all just trying to figure it out together, especially working in Unreal right now. There's no like set way of doing anything. But do you guys have any like thing that you think?
would say one thing that really helps either when you start the job or you're trying to get in is understanding that you're just like a small part of a bigger picture. And a lot of the time when somebody gives you a shot or an asset or something, to understand that you want to just honor the vision of the director and whatever your supervisors say, and kind of like let the ego go and just be like, I want to just make sure that my team are okay, that my supervisor is happy, and the director is getting what they want. Because at school especially, you're working on your own project. You decide what it's going to look like. You sometimes even decide what the concept is. But in a studio, it's a very much bigger picture than just one person. So my advice will be to, once you start working, just think about it like that. Do you have anything to add?
I can think of something. I'll say on this latest project that we did, I work a lot with Scott on setting up the layout and just kind of how the shots are laid out. And on this last project, there's only a couple of us who really knew how the pipeline had been set up. And so I ended up training people on how to use it. And, you know, I would field a lot of the questions that, you know, if Scott's busy, they'll come to me. And I'll say, I am a stickler for naming conventions. And I'll just, I will use Byron as an example, a good example. What I appreciated was, you know, there's like a way that we have to do things. And it was like, you know, especially since we're setting up the pipeline, and it was like, try to stick to, you know, kind of like the path that we have laid out. And he would always before, because I mean, if we didn't do it right, because we're still building up the pipeline, things can get messed up. And Byron would always ask, like, am I doing this right? Da, 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 da. Like, I just want to be sure that I'm sticking to the naming convention. I'm sticking to how it's supposed to be done in the pipeline. Because if you don't do it, the things are going to fall apart. And, you know, it's not like an attitude thing, but it's just like a super helpful thing. And so I'll just say that, just something that recently happened.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of two things, you know, always following up and being a really good listener.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And being a cool person to hang out with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you're going to be working with these people all day. You want to hang out with them. And
it's like your extended family.
yeah, you're all solving problems together, right? That's right. Any last questions before we wrap this up? I don't think so. Going once, going twice. Okay, well that wraps up our event. I want to extend another huge thank you to AGBO. Thank you again, Ryan, Scott, Rain, and Natalie. We really appreciate your time and your insights. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight on campus and online. Gnomon hosts monthly industry events on campus, so be sure to follow us on social media and join the mailing list to stay up to date on our event schedule. We're also hosting Adobe on October 23rd for Substance Days Los Angeles. It'll be a full day of presentations and demos, as well as a mixer in the evening. You can register for the event on Gnomon's website under the event tab. If you're interested in learning more about Gnomon, we offer lots of ways to connect. Open houses, virtual info sessions, Saturday campus tours. Our next open house will be on Saturday, November 8th. Send us a message on Instagram. We're at Gnomon_school, and we will get you signed up. Until next time, thank you, everybody. Good night.